Today on Arguing Agile, we're talking about the 18th State of Agile Report from Digital.AI. Is it a clear-eyed snapshot of where the industry actually is? Or is it a 27-page sales brochure dressed up as research? So Ed presented at the last Tampa Bay Agile event titled Agile at a Crossroads, Frameworks, Frustrations, and the Future. And my takeaway, Ed, from that presentation had strong vibes of, are we in a market for lemons? Is that what this report is telling me?
We could be.
I'm glad you went there because I'm like, it would have been a short podcast if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or maybe a long podcast if you were like, I didn't know what we were talking about. But, do you know about the Nobel Prize winning George Ackerlof paper about how asymmetric information causes market dysfunction? And that paper is titled The Market for Lemons from 1970.
So you're saying Digital.AI just published a survey of their own lemon lot, and they're also selling car warranties.
Maybe. All right, welcome back to Arguing Agile. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm your host, Product Manager Brian Orlando, and this is my co-host, Enterprise Business Agility Consultant, and the godfather of product-led growth, Mr. Om Patel.
Instant promotion today, I guess.
That's right. Like and subscribe. So, listen, they all made up their job title anyway. You might as well make. So the promise today is so that what you see on the slides is going to be what's on the screen. So by the end of this episode, I hope that you will be informed as to the 18th annual State of Agile report, and you'll have a better understanding of which numbers on the report are real. I don't want to give away my hand before we get into this, and which ones are made up and which ones to question. Okay, we're going to talk about that. You'll also have a broad understanding of Ackerlof's lemons market because we're going to talk about that paper and how it may or may not apply to Big A Agile.
How to buy lemons at the bazaar.
Ooh, the bazaar. I have like on a podcast which may or may not have come out by the time this one comes out. I could not, in my head, I was like, in the future, when everyone's using AI and the cost of producing software drops to zero, is the game going to be you have an idea and you just ship 10 prototypes and you bring them all to like a trade conference or whatever? Like the trade conferences get very specific to that thing, and then you as the vendor just bring your software to that thing, like your 10 prototypes, because you've all lost the ability to actually talk to people anymore because you've got thought leaders on large podcasts. That's what I'm saying. Saying don't talk to people.
I question whether there's actually a vendor location anymore. If you just write your own software, it produces it for you. You say, hey, I want a thing, and it says, here's your thing. And so now it's personalized software.
It could be. And that was the bizarre.
Exactly.
Yikes. Before we get into the first category, does anybody want to take a shot at defining the Ackerlof market for lemons paper, which is like an 11-page paper? So he goes through a couple examples, but the car lot is, or the car ecosystem, the used car ecosystem is the best example that is the easiest to convey out of that paper.
In the 70s, it was the easiest way to convey his thought and statistical analysis of the market, and he actually describes a 2x2 of good and bad and new and used, and then he provides that analysis and his assumptions of where asymmetrical information helps drive used car sales over new car sales, and the potential of good or bad buys to the buyer.
I would even simplify that to say when one side in the sales market has more information than the other side and can hold that information back, then the buyer can't tell if something is good quality or bad quality. So then the buyer, after getting ripped off too many times, just won't buy that thing anymore. That's the way I would frame it. Which basically what was
and misinformation. Misinformation also influences the buyer.
What he's theorizing is it would lead to a total market collapse. It's funny because I don't think he has any solid examples in 1970 when he wrote the paper, but here we are, like many years later, like the subprime mortgage crash and potentially what we're about to talk about today, maybe examples of the lemon lot of his paper. And what you just pointed out in even in the paper, which again, it's only 11 pages, so everyone should read it. It's a very quick read. And out of those 11 pages, like a quarter of them are just like statistical formulas.
Yeah, flip through the equations.
Where he puts in the paper, one of the interesting things he puts in the paper is the fact that the market is like that opens up the market to fraud. He didn't say fraud in the paper, but he says something else very similar. And the more fraud that happens in the market, the faster it drives the market to failure. So interesting. Keep it in the back of your mind while we're talking about this category, or while we're talking through this podcast. Let's talk about the first category, which leads us directly into the State of Agile report. And we're going to pull up the report, kind of go back and forth. We'll kind of be all over the place in this podcast, but stick with us. My story gets better. So a quote from the paper: 41% of organizations increased their Agile investment in the last 2 years. Only 13% say that Agile is actually embedded across the business. So what exactly are these folks buying?
Expensive PowerPoint decks? I don't know.
It's the percentages and the answers kind of, what are they buying, but what did they believe they were buying, and what did they actually buy? And so, PowerPoint decks are there. Did they actually get coaching out of it? Are they adopting what's being brought to them? It's definitely subjective. There's some contradictory stats in here, and I think the authors even call some of that out, and I think we're gonna talk about those also. But it's interesting that as they go through this, they're increasing their investment, and they're complaining about the cost of AI, they're complaining about the cost of agility, but then there's the pressures to perform.
So here's issue number 1, Exhibit A, Your Honor. It says 41% reported increasing their investment in scaling Agile over the past 2 years. 17% say it increased significantly. 24% say it increased somewhat. And I'm not going to find the smaller, like there in the appendix, all the actual Q&A answers are there with the breakdown of respondents' answers. I'm not going to go find them, but we did a pretty thorough job when we were prepping to get ready for this podcast, to where I don't want to go and look at every single one of them. But this increase their spending or increase their investment on scaling Agile, to me, doesn't necessarily mean you increase your agility.
Right.
Not to give away what side I'm on here.
And one of the interesting things there is it's the last 2 years analysis, right?
Yeah.
What about the last 6 months? So these types of market analysis of what's going on in the industry, they're changing monthly. And so what's next year's report going to look like is going to be interesting as well. And they spent a lot of time prior. This has been a report that's been around for a long time, right? It's the 18th edition. Mm-hmm. They spent a lot of time asking about agility and agile questions and frameworks and structures. And this one's all about AI.
I mean, I understand that because they don't want to get left behind. They don't want to get left behind in the market. They want to be seen as, hey, we're doing AI just like everyone else, buddy.
Right.
What did I call that? What did I call it at the event? With isomorphism? Isomorphism, I think I called it. Isomorphism in psychology. It posits. There you go, It posits.
It posits.
It made
Our first posit
it made it
today.
into another podcast. It posits. Structural one-to-one correspondence between subjective conscious experience, perception, and an underlying physical brain process. Where am I going with this? Boy, what a terrible definition. Coercive isomorphism in psychology and organizational behavior describes how organizations or individuals adopt identical, standardized structures or behaviors due to external authoritative pressures such as regulation, legal mandates, or dependency on other entities or investors. Hey, I went to a board meeting, and my board member said, hey, how come you haven't adopted AI yet? All my other boards that I sit on, they're all gung-ho on AI. You seem like you're falling behind. That is a coercive isomorphism right there. Or the stock market punishes you for not adopting any AI initiatives. That's also, loosely coercive isomorphism.
You could have just come back from a conference and heard your peers talk about this. So you come back and say, stop doing everything you're doing now.
Has
Let's
AI
pivot
made it
now.
to SkyMall yet?
SkyMall has I was gonna say what you just described to him sounds a lot like Agile. We're doing Agile. Oh, I just came back from the conference, and this other company says they're quote doing Agile. How come we're not doing Agile?
Whatever the CIO says, or CFO, whoever, CXO.
Yeah.
But that is one of the things that that's in the conversation is as Agilists, and we've been through this disruption before. 2005, 2006, Agile is coming out, pushing through the industries. We've been through this type of change where it wasn't governed very well, it wasn't regulated very well within the organizations. Everyone just came in and said, hey, play these games, let's get together and let's do this stuff. And it just started happening within the organizations. We're kind of seeing that with AI now, and it's just as disruptive. And I think that some of the Agilists and who went through that experience can benefit with their own personal experiences and drive strategy as well.
Yeah, definitely. Just to kind of quickly double click there, we've seen it before. The difference is now everyone's running towards AI. Whereas before it was only the ambitious ones that said, let's try it, right? And others are just cautiously waiting to see if it works. Now it's just like, just pull out all the stops. Let's all do AI, because if you don't have it, you're immediately behind your competitors.
Yeah, if the coaches had the drive to adopt that teams have right now for AI, it would be a completely different world.
We'd be in a different place. Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking about that adoption statistic we were just covering.
All right, let me find the question 1 of the survey. In the survey questions, question number 1 says, how would you describe the current state of Agile across your organization? And 13% of respondents said Agile is deeply embedded across business, technology, and supporting functions, e.g. HR, shouldn't that be IE? HR, marketing, legal, with work aligned to strategic outcomes. So I think they just nailed deeply embedded in the business at all business levels. I think that's what they mean. Whereas other respondents, in the majority, by the way, are primarily limited to team level execution, scaled across IT, but the business is not really involved, and Agile is practiced in some departments. The usage is inconsistent. That's like a solid 60 plus 67% is those 3 things that I just listed. So the article points out a minority of companies are deeply embedding what the respondents, the 300 and whatever, 49 or whatever respondents say is deeply embedded across business functions.
Which means it's still primarily IT.
Yes, primarily IT, but also some team level stuff. The majority one is some departments, but usage is inconsistent. So it's not even across all of IT, the 25% one. It's scary.
And their organizational size, I believe, was enterprises with primarily was enterprises with 200 or more employees as well, just from a stat standpoint of who they were talking to.
Are you talking about the survey?
Yeah,
the survey was across all. Survey was the demographic numbers are here. Here they don't go less than 1,000, so I can't. This block here, I didn't break off the demographics into a section on its own to be considered on the podcast because I thought that this split was pretty fair. Although now that you're drawing my attention to it, I'm like 1,000 employees is the barrier, like 0 to 1,000 or whatever, 1 to 1,000 employees.
98% of the organizations in the U.S. are giant, 100 or less.
Anyway, that they're trying to show here that they've got a solid split across organizations of all size. But yeah, you're right. Now that I'm looking at the breakdown of the sizes of organizations, man, that's 1 to 1,000 and over 20,000 as the caps of the lower and upper tiers. Like, those are some serious caps.
Yeah, and also their purview is across the world, not just America.
If you're digging into the methodology and having issues, Ed, I just want to let you know it's too early in the podcast for that. We've got a whole section just to say, are these numbers good?
We'll sit by and wait.
Stand by. So the paper says, the days of, quote, pure play Agile appear to be fading. A combined 74% now use hybrid or homegrown approaches, up sharply from 50% in Y16 and 52% in Y17. This is Y18. It went up from 52% to 74%. It went up 22%. No, sorry, 18%. It went up significantly. 16 and 17, it went up by 2%. Between 17 and 18, went up an incredible amount comparatively.
And we talked about it a little bit last night at the meetup, and it was strongly focused around the point that there's a lack of discipline in some respects, and then there's some maturity in others, meaning we've outgrown the book, so we're going to do it our way. And we focused on the idea that as long as the team stayed true to the values, if you don't want to do a retrospective, and that's the time that the team does inspect and adapt for themselves, as long as there is something that the team takes time to do and expect and adapt, hybrid is fine. But if you're removing the retrospective and not replacing it with something else, and you're not taking the time as a team member to inspect and adapt, then you're devolving or not being disciplined in the approach of, quote, quote, traditional big A Agile.
74% hybrid, up from 50 whatever 2%. What was it? 52%.
50%.
From 50% 2 years ago up to 24% in 2 years of people saying we're just going to roll our own. Let me ask you: do you feel that's people maturing to the point where they can they just outgrown the practices? They're too limited. They're too limiting. We just need to roll our own practices.
Yeah, they're in the re of the shuhari at this point. Not having been in the shoe, maybe they were in the shoe for a little bit, but certainly didn't go through the transition through ha, right? And break all the rules because we're unique. We see that everywhere pretty much, right? Agile doesn't work here as is. We're unique. So we're just going to bend the rules, twist them, break them, whatever. At that point, are you really even following anything, or just muddling through?
So let me play the role on this podcast of the other side. Okay, and I'm going to say that even the report says this won't be the last time that I express my frustration with the formatting of this report. And it's not the first time, won't be the last time. It says a clear shift away from formal frameworks towards adaptive, fit-for-purpose models that reflect how organizations actually deliver today. It signals a clear shift away. Yeah, so in that section where they're saying, we went up to 74% from 50% in Y16. So that is that's a shift away where people are organically choosing this brave new world of how they're. I mean, that's one take, but also like my take is hybrid and homegrown is basically what teams did in the 90s and early 2000s when I started my career when there was no agile. It was just shooting cowboy development, shooting from the hip, staying up until midnight, pushing that release across the finish line. Doing pajama parties to do deployments. That's what I take out of this is no structure, whatever our boss tells us to do. That's what I'm hearing from this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would be one thing if the teams were intact over this duration, they matured organically, etc. We all know that not to be the case, right?
Yeah,
there's plenty of churn on these teams, and this whole offshoring model as well, where vendors aren't held accountable to bring the skill sets that are needed. They don't need to train their staff.
Yeah.
Certainly, the contracting company isn't going to train vendors, right? So, yeah, we haven't really matured.
One more point. If I'm going to throw out one more point to kind of be fair to this report, I think that the typical agile coach in the room. So there are no more in the room, but if there was one in the room, not to cut us ahead or anything, would say agility is different for every organization, and you're not going to see a statistic across all organizations. It's the increasing investment they point out, that might be the right thing. As opposed to whatever ceremonies or whatever, rituals or whatever they're called today.
Yeah. And the other thing on the report, I would be frustrated if I was the analytics person trying to make sense of the respondents' answers, because clearly they're like, how can these two things be true? And they're trying to make sense of it themselves. And I think that there's a continuity in the answering as well that causes some of these challenges, but it pulls out what's real.
Ed, are you saying the buyers can't judge the quality of the?
I think I just jumped to your sign on that a little bit. Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness!
Yes,
so
sir.
How dare you? Sorry, I don't know. So what specific outcomes? Let me figure a takeaway. Let me figure out a way to cap this takeaway in this category. So what specific outcomes will putting dollars into agility at your business? Like what business capabilities are we buying with these dollars? By funding Scrum Masters or by having these people who are at this coordination layer in the organization. I feel organizations are not good at asking that question. Like what business capabilities are we? Because we talked about on the podcast before, we talked about when they cut these positions. They don't think of it. They think of it as like cells on a spreadsheet. They don't think of it as like, we're going to cut away these business capabilities. We don't need to talk to people anymore, and talking to customers is overrated.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, some of the measures that you're talking about could be, time to market, improved time to market, for example, right? Smiles per customer, those sorts of things. But I dare say there's not a huge focus on those. The focus is more inward looking and on vanity metrics still, for the most part. Efficiency at the art level, or velocity and things like that. They're still pretty prevailing out there, unfortunately, or prevalent out there.
or sorry, I was gonna say efficiency as a dollar metric of hours per like ROI increment or something.
Dollars per point.
Yeah, something like
Those
that.
sorts of
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, dollar per point, that goes a long
Yeah.
way. If your objective is customer retention, right, the metric is churn rate, right? So making sure that we're measuring customer retention. Well, how are you using a leading indicator or using a lagging indicator? Are you really measuring it? And are you helping yourself? One of the people I talked to said that we release these features and we won't know for 12 months. What can you measure right now that will tell you every 2 weeks for the next 12 months?
Yeah.
So so that would be the leading indicator, not waiting 12 months to find out. So yeah, there are ways. And when one of the team members said, "Hey, we're releasing 12 features," and then I use the so what test. So what, right? You release 12 features. So what's that value you're hoping to get out of those? And that helps drive that conversation into what metric you should be using or where the value is.
Speaking of so what do you think? Is your organization in that 13% that have mastered agility? Let us know in the comments. Our next discussion is of the most contradictory stat in the entire report. So investment is up, but adoption is shallow. All right, Ed, we're going to sing Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper right now. We're going to sing Shallow. All right, so that seems like two stats that can't both be true, right? Maybe? I don't know.
No, I don't think two of us can sing.
So let's read the lyrics to Shallow. I'm going to say let's read what the paper says. Okay, it says 63%. You know what? I'm going to put do I have a quote for this? Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says 63% of respondents say, quote, "We are struggling as a company to deliver reliable, high-quality software." And then, at the same time, the paper says 68% say, quote, 55. I'll get swifty. At least 50. See, that was a Mike Miller joke. At least 50% of our applications are delivered on time and with high quality.
Oh, wait. 63% are struggling and 50% are delivering?
63%.
That's 113%.
63% are struggling. No, because remember the numbers don't overlap. They're not exclusory.
That's right.
Okay, so 63% of people said yes, we are struggling to deliver reliable, high quality software, and then 68% said at least 50% of our applications are delivered on time and with high quality. So then in an absolutely wild moment of self-awareness with the paper, I don't know, some editor who's like an intern or whatever left this in. He said the paper says, quote, "Both statements can't be fully true, which suggests organizations are either sacrificing quality to hit deadlines or defining quality so inconsistently that success and struggle coexist." I would say only because I have a little background in this subject. This is not a binary of like, it must be this or this. There's probably a range of things.
Yeah, success and struggle does coexist.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, different teams, different products, different answers. That would be the argument here is like, hey, listen, every team's different. One team's quality definition has nothing to do with another team. Like, get off my back, Brian.
I would argue that different people on the same team answers would be different.
Probably, yes. Yeah, and then they will say, something like, well, quality. I mean, that depends on the team. It's contextual, right? That's the other argument that they'll make.
It's funny because we didn't go into the other one that I thought was going to come up, which was the data reflects that in the AI era, like that falling quality, that like dip in quality, everyone's hyper aware of it now. So that means everyone's paying attention to it. So that means everyone's asking more of quality in the AI era. And that is what's responsible for this. Now, I'm not saying like one of these is the true answer and everything else is wrong. It could be a salt, pepper of all of the things at once. And as we know, because leadership is like nowhere to be found, like it's just everything's just kind of like falling apart at the, like you're living in the house and you're like, why are these walls crumbling? Does nobody take care of any of this? And then you look around and there's no adults there.
Yeah, leadership is not being taught the way it was 25 years ago.
So both numbers can be both things can be true here, but also a smattering of other things could be true.
Yeah.
Ed, was it only just pointed out, or Ed, did you just point out that when you got both of these answers, that just tells me that nobody understands what quality really means.
I think we agreed. I think it's actually in the quote, in that second quote, that they're either sacrificing quality to deadlines or defining quality inconsistently. So, yeah, there is definitely, it's done. I shipped it over the weekend. I worked, a 70-hour shift to get it done, but it got done because the sprint goal was everything must be completed this month, even though it's twice my trending capacity.
Well, I thought you were going to say because it's 1999 and that's how we rolled.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we rolled.
Yeah, but Y2K, we had to get done. That was a hard deadline.
That's what I'm saying. It was a hard deadline.
Thankfully, it turned out to be a nothing burger.
It's because all the QA guys killed it. They did great.
Somebody made money. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
So now would be the time of the podcast for me to take a break and say, this category is just one more reason that it was really infuriating to read this, because of conflicting statements like this. It's not that the numbers conflict, because they even pointed out, like, hey guys, we know this is weird. Like, wink wink, nudge nudge, we know it's weird. And then they didn't go into it at all.
But it's true. Right. It's weird, but it's true because that's what the people say.
But like if you're running a statistical study,
yeah,
and then you find statistical anomalies,
you report on it anyways.
You're just gonna wink and be like, "It's all cool, right? These are funny." Like, you're not gonna do any in depth. You're not gonna do any.
Go back and correct the data.
That sounds like hard work.
You're not gonna send your intern to at least ask the people, like, what? Nothing.
What do you mean by that?
And also, when we were prepping, like, and I looked through the last, like, 3 or 4 of these studies. Let's just put it this way. Every study that I've ever seen, because we are regularly reading research papers on the podcast now. That's one of the reasons it's taken longer to get podcasts out. They have some sort of, like, statistical rigor that has gone into, year 1, we're going to measure X, Y, and Z, and then we're going to report on it. And then year 2, we're going to measure X, Y, and Z against a baseline that we established in whatever previous years, X minus whatever previous years.
How would you do that? Ask the same questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you would
just make sure I'm tracking.
You would ask the same questions, or at least the same categories. Mm-hmm. But when we went back to the different years with this report, not only were the questions different, but, like, the reporting was completely different, and the categories were completely different, and I couldn't even find questions. Like, I just quit. I was like, this is not worth my time. I don't live on the planet. I don't know you people.
So instead of the 18th State of Agile Report, it should have been the first State of AI Report?
It's just something.
Only if the second report focuses on the same sort of thing. So this report doesn't seem to me like it's meant to be comparative from a previous one. Right? It's just snapshot in time. Here's what it is. I know the AI thing is new, and therefore it is a snapshot in time, first one, but even the previous ones we looked at, they were all unique and differently structured.
Oh, I worked for a lot of psychopaths in my career, and I will tell you, exploiting the data, massaging the data,
manipulating
to make it fit whatever point you're trying to make or whatever tool you're trying to sell is very easy.
That sounds like a malicious angle. Leveraging the data to your own advantage.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say. What's the quote that you had that's so good? It's being economical with the data.
Oh yeah, being economical with the truth
based on your financial incentives.
Yes. Companies do this often in their quarterly earnings reports. When they say, right, "Here's what we project." Yeah. And then they'll say, that's just a forward-looking statement. Ooh. And past performance is no guarantee of future results.
Yeah, safe harbor. That's mandated.
Yeah.
But, and you use the word malicious, and I just wanted to defend them a little bit. I don't know that they're being malicious, but I do. The responses they got are very concerning into what's being said. What's the takeaway? And then the consistency of, last year's report, the year before that, we saw safe. You go all the way back in time. You see agile adoption. You see safe growing. You see safe declining, and then here we are. There, frameworks are missed, and everyone's rolling their own, and no one's actually delivering or getting anything done. It's just it does create conversation. So the point of our meetup last night was about the conversation. Here's what the report's there. Yeah. What does that mean to us? Because we're all trying to figure out where to go. And the only thing that we can kind of lead on from an industry standpoint that's reported out there is this, and it's questionable and confusing, right? Just like today's market.
Well, I like to end categories on a positive note, and I'm glad that we're on a positive note now because I'm done talking about this category. So the stats here are confusing, and they don't offer consistency before they draw conclusions, which they don't even bother trying to do that. They just throw numbers at us that are like, yeah, bro, they don't work. Like, get off of my boat. Like, and I'll thank you for getting off of my yacht. Next question. So we're going to move on. So stick around while we discuss the real problem that is at the root.
Yes, it is.
That is at the root of all the issues that we just talked about and more. Okay, so the report says only 15% of organizations say that they're respondents. Only 15% of respondents say that business and executive leaders in their organizations actively shape agile practices. But 76% report increased pressure to prove ROI. So I'm going to say that again because it's slightly important. Leaders are demanding faster results from a system with which they are not engaged. And, often I don't use proper English to describe things, but I figured I'd do it now so that people on the internet can't be like, Brian, you're just being a jerk. I will say yes, and the numbers don't lie.
Yeah, what can go wrong when leaders aren't engaged and yet demanding a return on investment? What can go wrong?
I mean, the funny thing is, this is the J.J. Sutherland quote in the on page 9. He says 76% report rising pressure to prove ROI on agile investments, yet more than half admit they can't prioritize the right work. 53% can't prioritize the right work or track business impact at 52%. Leaders are demanding faster results from systems they don't understand or actively guide. That's a J.J. Sutherland. And unlike Marty Kagan and Manuel Pius and the other guy, maybe he'll respond to my tweets. I don't know. We'll find out.
He may. I've seen him interact quite a bit on social media.
Yeah, I mean, growing up with a dad who would always send me out to do something and ask me why I wasn't done yet, but I couldn't get the lawnmower started because I couldn't pull the cord fast enough and hard enough to make it actually start because he wouldn't clean the carburetor to give me a working system to help me mow the grass, but it was my fault. Those kind of feelings well up in me when I think about lacking leadership and lacking direction and lacking clear visual guidelines.
Real late 70s, early 80s energy right now on the podcast. Like a total boomer move right there, Ed, is like...
Not a boomer, I'm Xer, but at the same time, kids today don't understand when all they have to do is press the button.
Talking about your dad.
Yeah, my dad was...
How dare you inconvenience me?
But back to leadership, right? There is a need.
Back to leadership.
There is a need to recognize that there's a struggle with the team. There's a struggle with the system, and going out and being actively involved to remove the struggle, remove the impediment, to help the team get done what needs to get done.
Sure.
Not just demand more and more of, hey, give me more reporting on where the ROI is on the thing that I'm not telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Shocking thing here in that stat, in that quote from Sutherland is over half the people don't even know how to prioritize the right work. And again, he said over 50% of the people that don't know how to track the business impact. Right. So what are we spending our effort, money, and energies on, right? Who would be asking that? Who should be asking that question? I'd say that's leadership. But again, we're lacking there too. So the odds are stacked against us here.
And that goes back. Yeah, that goes back to that so what story, right? So the team is saying, I released 17 things. And I'm assuming those are the 17 things you wanted because they were on the backlog and they were part of the sprint that you gave me to do. So I think I'm doing a good job because I did the 17 things you asked for. Yeah. But if the team can't answer the so what and the business can't answer the so what, who is, how do you measure an ROI? How do you measure client engagement? How do you manage cost cuts on the things that you're doing if you're not thinking about it before you actually start?
Yeah. Yeah, the teams are asked to work on 17 things because they're not necessarily the highest priority 17 things from the quote. Half the people can't even prioritize those 17. So the half that can, great, but the other half, the teams, like to your point, they'll just say we've delivered, but then, so what? Did we deliver the right things? And leadership's there saying, pounding their fist on the desk, give me ROI, give me ROI. It's like, just throw mud at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Do we cover later about project versus product funding?
I don't know.
I'll jump in that a little bit right now.
But we're now, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll jump in a little bit right now. Is the difference between product and project funding is they're asking about ROI, but they're set up as a project team delivering the 17 features for the project, and the funding is based on that, and they're going to ship off next sprint, and hey, all right, those are the last 17 things. Now let's disband and go do something else called a project. But yet, when they're working on that, this other thing they just left behind has some cruft on it, has some things that have to get done.
Oh man, Marty Kagan just had a great retweet this morning about that I responded to, that he of course won't respond to either. But did I tell you that earlier?
No.
Oh,
No.
I'll show him. Oh, I'll show you. So the trade-off, while I'm finding that tweet, it was a LinkedIn post. While I'm finding that, the argument here is you don't want leadership in the weeds of everything. You don't want them in the weeds.
No, I don't want them in the weeds. I don't want them in the weeds, but I want some priorities.
The top quote fixes requested in the survey here, 29% of people pointed to culture focused on outcome and adaptability. Is that the thing they needed from leadership, basically? 27% said stronger leadership support and alignment. 17% wanted a clearer connection between delivery work and business goals. I mean, between those three things, there's some strong yearning for what I think of as basic product management. So what's wrong in these organizations where they don't have basic product? How can you have agility without the basics of product management? And I think to answer that question, I have to pull up the thing that I told you I would pull up here, which requires me to find LinkedIn and find Marty Kagan.
Is a study in and of itself.
I'm showing on the screen post that I responded to today, actually, where Marty Kagan retweeted. Sorry, what is it called on LinkedIn? Is it called retweeting? Resharing? Resharing on LinkedIn? What's
he shared a post.
Repost. So he reposted Mike Fisher, who's the CEO of MyFitnessPal, and the CEO of MyFitnessPal is talking about, and again, this goes back to the market for lemons, because again, before it was product operating model, project model, whatever, Marty Kagan, obviously, when we sell the product operating model, this is not a judgment, this is just a reality. Benefits when we try to undermine the project model and install the product model. The previous market for lemons was installing Agile, uninstalling the project model. That had scattered results, arguably. Now the product operating model's here. So he's reinforcing. The only reason I bring it up is because we had a discussion, which may or may not be in the podcast, about the people behind bad reasons of why we're still doing you didn't get this done or you didn't do whatever. So trust me, it's a long story, but it's relevant. So Mike Fisher points out that at the turn of the century, Samuel Langley, he had funding, he had visibility, he had expectations. Arguably, he had all the experts, right?
And the relationships.
To get the first aircraft, the first flying airplane produced and flying. And the Wright brothers came along and did it before him. Even though he obviously had the superior team, technology, funding, everything at his fingertips, seemingly. Okay?
Right.
And the post said, which I'm showing on the screen here, but for everyone listening, he says, at the turn of the century, Samuel Langley had the funding, visibility, and expectations. His work produced artifacts. He showed progress. It checked boxes, but it did not fly. And 9 days after his final failure, the Wright brothers, I think he only had 2 test flights. 9 days after his final failure, the Wright brothers achieved controlled flight, not because they had better resources, but because they were solving a different problem. They weren't optimizing for output. They were obsessed with an outcome. And that distinction defines product teams today. We ask for ROI before we've learned anything. We shape experiments to fit spreadsheets, and we confuse activity with progress. So he's making a very specific statement with this post, which I appreciate because it's more about hey, listen, not every experiment is going to directly have ROI that you can see right away. And you need to check yourself, which is a good point.
And this is where learn early is better than fail fast.
Which is a good point, okay? And we did a podcast very recently, that it hasn't come out yet, about when you focus only on outcomes, you very quickly can lead yourself down the path to evil because you're just completely focused on we talked about the gorilla experiment.
Yeah.
People are watching the ball getting passing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's classic.
Yeah. I didn't even know what that was until we did that podcast.
Oh, really?
No, I didn't. And so I replied to this one and I said, hey, this is great about I mix total point about project versus product and totally mix a point. But if we're not going to talk about project versus product and models and Agile and Scrum and all the frameworks and that kind of stuff, we're going to strip all that out. We need to talk about the Wright brothers and Langley. The people. We need to talk about the people. Because in a very short amount of time this morning, I went through and I read a little history of Langley. Apparently, Langley was a real character that was, quote, difficult to work with and was described as, quote, where did I put? quote, domineering, quick to hand down orders, and impatient. I put an article in the post there. Probably.
I'm sorry, that article link is 1213 fraud.
Yeah. No, because in the article, well, again, I guess now I got to link it. In the article, they're talking about the fraud. They're talking about was apparently Langley and the people that the people that followed him, predecessors, successors in the Smithsonian, the people he installed basically. They put his prototype airplane in the Smithsonian with the plaque that says like the first powered airplane to ever fly, and the Wright brothers were so upset by that because they were like, well, it's a fraud. It's not true. That they sent their plane to the
Kensington Museum in the UK.
England. Yeah. And the Smithsonian, because now the Smithsonian obviously has the flyer, but but it was like only until after Langley died, I think, did they come to that. But that's like the fraud of it is like he was such a character in that aspect that like even he couldn't acknowledge like the obvious truth, because that was his personality. And I sat down when we were talking about the planning for this podcast, and I said, project versus product model and agility or not, like I feel like there's some checks and balances you can do to realize that I've got these people in my organization and they may not really the collaboration and cooperation with other people may not be their strong suit. That might be the problem.
But that comparison contracts. I mean, the Wright brothers truly had an outcome.
Yeah.
Right. The comparison right there is night and day. But it also is what many consultants run into with, the big behemoth groups out there who have been there, done that. They have their size and they can do no wrong. They must be right. And so let's keep sending them money, even though the outcomes aren't necessarily measured. And sometimes they are successful. I'm not trying to, be too difficult, but, there is their success rate worthy of the attention they receive?
I put some of their success to chance variation.
Getting back to the report talks about project cancellation still being the biggest failure. And so, how many of those projects just end in cancellation?
Yeah. Surprisingly high number, actually. Yeah.
Having to prove the ROI of Agile or we cut funding, it's a bit of a misnomer in my opinion. Well, the biggest challenge with most coaches when they come in is, we used to say, hey, 3 sprints, it's going to show you where the dysfunction is. Sure. 3 sprints, you're going to know. Well, a lot of times now, as we're bringing in, as the roles are changing, and it's brought up in the book, in the report as well, is as you get more towards strategy and you come in with a different level of skill than what was expected from prior coaches, and you start talking about costs and funding and the dollars and cents of the business, and then you start challenging them on those things, it's hitting them. They're emotionally responding. They're allergic to those conversations more so than we're going to show you dysfunctions in 3 sprints. Yeah.
Because you can walk in right away and say, your team's not changing, your team's not doing this, and they don't like the answer when you tell them.
What would you say if I tried to push back to say those agilists that are saying that they want more leadership involvement, like they don't necessarily want more autonomy to be able to push improvements to the organization and like take ownership of problems. They just want visibility.
I think what I heard the question was, from the Agile's perspective, who want leadership, what do they really want? I'm going to try to describe it without quoting which organization it was, but a little more than 10 years ago, I was introduced to an organization that actually had an executive Kanban board, and that executive team managed their own epics. They managed their own top 10 initiatives every quarter, and that then rolled down to the teams to make sure that the teams were doing things that were aligned. And right now, I don't think most executives understand what is on the team's boards and whether or not they tie to what they say their priorities are, what their roadmap is. The roadmap is produced as a wish list and forgotten about after it's produced. Yeah. They come back 12 months later and say, why didn't we get anything done?
Yeah.
That's a broad brush.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty close to most organizations and what the numbers say.
I'd agree with that. I think if you're doing it justice, roadmaps aren't something that you just do once and put away. Right? They're not one and done. They constantly have to be updated, reviewed, etc. So
sometimes there's construction on the road. You got to go a different route.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, sense and respond.
If you're a coach and you're stuck in the 85%, you're 85% meaning the opposite of the 15% that say that their leadership are actively involved. So you're part of the 85%. Your leadership is not involved in any way, shape, or form, but they're still asking for ROI and numbers and that kind of stuff. What's your path forward?
Forcing factors, making sure that the teams that I'm working with or coaching, or at whatever level I can get to, are actually producing output from the reportable output, not deliverable. I'm talking about reportable output that shows what we did, where our impediments were, and tells the story, so that over the course of time, even though that isn't being read by that leader, at some point they're going to go, why didn't you tell me? I told you here, I told you here, I told you here, and you weren't looking. And so that becomes that forcing factor and it's not a CYA. That's not what I'm trying to describe. I'm trying to describe that the team has done everything we could to make you aware. You chose not to be aware. Yeah. And so now that you want to be aware, I don't have to go back and make the story up and dig up history. I've already got the history that we can talk about. So many teams wait for the request to, what did you get done? When did you get it done? And they're going back through their backlogs and trying to figure out what they did, when they got it done. And then they're realizing their own backlog hygiene is horrible, and it takes them weeks to actually produce that data. But if you have the discipline and the hygiene that you're producing at the end of whatever your iteration time is, whether you call it a sprint or not, but some fixed iteration, less than a quarter, this is what we did. These were our challenges. This is what we're working on. And this is where we thought we were creating value. This is where we thought it aligned with business objectives. This is where we thought it met your increased revenue, decreased cost, customer satisfaction, or infrastructure needs. And you can answer that, and it's on the spot when it's requested for. That helps you with trust and credibility at the moment it's requested.
Yeah, I'd just add a little bit to that. If these leaders are not engaged, you're not suddenly going to get them engaged in a
But they're going to be reactive.
Yeah, I mean, leading with data is great, right? But also your messaging to them shouldn't be about efficiency measures, things like that. It should be about terminology that they resonate with, right? So, ROI, they're asking for more ROI, but you have impediments, etc. Instead of just raising those as impediments, you could say the cost of these impediments, the opportunity cost lost, or whatever, in terms of measures they understand, dollars and time wasted, right? Maybe you'll get them interested in engaging further going forward.
The challenge with at the team level reporting up, the challenge with cost and ROI is most teams don't know what their cost is, what their fully burdened labor costs are. They don't know what their infrastructure costs are. They don't really know how to communicate cost because they don't have necessarily someone in that seat that's helping them to understand it. And then from an ROI standpoint, they don't necessarily have visibility into where's the income. They don't see the income sheet to see where the money's coming from. Yeah. Did I actually increase my retention rate?
Yeah. This is where an agile coach or somebody like that can help, right? You can easily work out the cost of a sprint, etc., right? The blended average cost of a person and so on and so forth. But yeah, the team level, at that level, maybe they don't have that, but they can get help.
They can get help, but they have to know to get help. Yeah. But if they're in the churn where they're getting the pressure, right? The pressure's on to deliver and execute. They don't have the time. They're not thinking through that slow is fast.
Right.
And to slow down and figure out what they need. And I think that was one of the things Shane brought up, right? Sometimes you just got to slow down.
Yeah.
Speaking of slowing down to speed up. All right. What do you think? So the single most useful thing that you need from leadership, what is it? Or is leadership just stiff arming you? They don't want to talk to you. Get out of my office, That's what they're saying. So let us know in the comments. That's what I'm saying. So get out of my office, and then get into the comments. Sorry, I almost started singing a Billy Ocean song right there. It came on strong. I didn't mean to. So we already talked about in the report that most people feel their leadership is not engaged. And then, of course, we laid off all the Scrum Masters, so we don't have any more people to help us communicate back and forth because we didn't know what they did. So we just got rid of them all. Who does that leave to do all these, quote, agile jobs?
Well, it leaves the dev lead to be the personnel manager, to be the product owner, and to be the scrum master, and an individual contributor to execute.
I like where you're going because the study says, or the paper says, 29% of Agile practitioners are now accountable for tying delivery work to business outcomes. 26% are doing less coaching as teams move to hybrid models. And 23% have been asked to evaluate AI tools. And if your job feels different than it did 18 months ago, you're not imagining it, because it is different, because things are changing. Direct quotes from the report are: pressure is mounting, roles are shifting, and frustration with Agile's application is rising. And that brings us to the term that was all the rage last night, Ed.
Bifurcating.
The roles are bifurcating.
Yeah, sometimes trifurcating.
It could be that too. Exactly. Yeah, the roles are bifurcating. You're either going towards strategy or you're going towards obsolescence.
See, a lot of people last night were like, "Oh, you're going towards strategy," and I that was one of the ones that I didn't say anything about because I had the hottest hot take. Sorry, I had the hottest hot take. You're not going to move your Agile role towards product management because product management has already segmented the market and said, "This is mine," and it is. Like that's done. That ship has sailed. It's gone. And I guess you can try to move into that career field, but that's where that is now. That's where those responsibilities have migrated to. We didn't talk about this last night, but when I went through the numbers today, the thing in the numbers that really stood out were the ones at the very bottom of question 3, where it says my Agile related responsibilities. It's talking about Agile related responsibilities. At the bottom, it says 14% say my Agile related responsibilities have decreased. 13% say that they've shifted away from Agile, and 5% say that my role has been eliminated or absorbed into another function. So between those three, again, they're not exclusory of each other. So maybe someone ticked all 3 of those boxes if they got laid off or whatever. But if you add them all up, I mean, that's like 30%, a little over 30%. And that is a significant number that say, we're just going to not do this Agile thing anymore.
It is. It's, going back to a prior question, it's good enough. It's better than nothing.
I mean, better than nothing. Solid maybe on that one.
But yeah, 30% of the people they became buggy whip salesmen overnight, right? And so that they went somewhere. Some fell out of the wagon not to be seen anymore, and others found a way to do something else with that product.
Listen, Ed, I didn't know that we were going to flip positions by the end of this podcast, and you were going to be arguing in the market for lemons. But I feel that one of the things I had sketched out to point out is good. Like, this role evolution was long overdue. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew what these people like. There's so many developer YouTube videos and whatever. There's like treating Scrum Master as a joke. There's so many people that I met at networking events and whatever that are like, you can get an AI bot to be your Scrum Master. They obviously don't understand what a Scrum Master does, and that is so permeated that if you were living in that world, you occasionally had to take a step back to say, there's no way this job role survives. When everybody about I think the same thing. To be fair, I think the same thing about product management. By the way. There's no way this job role survives because so many people, like the Silicon Valley people, think it does one thing. The bank people think it does another. Normal companies think it does something else, right? And none of them, even inside of their own companies, are the same. And that's before you inject AI product management and the pump and dump of AI product management and all that. Product management is in the same place, all over the map. No 2 product managers at companies, even 2 product managers in the same company, don't do the same job. If there was a point you thought I was going to, there's not. That's it.
No, I was just the one part.
Long overdue. That's
it is long overdue. But part of the organization that was missed in the description you made was, the entrepreneur who is self-funding his teams. Someone is doing a product management role. Someone is having to help that person execute and deliver, and it's not just a job function that is paid by some investors or some. It's when you have that relationship with the founder or entrepreneur who's funding that business, that's a completely different delivery model than when it's a job for some other logo in a business that who's truly funding it.
I know where you're going, and I agree with you.
But that's the majority of the businesses.
80% of the way on that path, I agree with you. The 20% where I don't agree is the business folks are doing product management, and they can't not do that. They have to have that as part of their job, even if it's like, even when you're a small company, every entrepreneur, every founder,
They are
of
the product
company,
manager.
They are the product manager until the company grows or the product grows or whatever, and they have to separate it, and then they bring in the founding product manager or whatever, principal, whatever they call it. I agree with you. I would also argue every team grows, every team divides, except with that one, we're like, this is going to be a great meme afterwards about the Joker is like separate product manager from the founder and nobody bats an eyelash. Separate agile coach from the founder and everyone loses their mind. Like suddenly we have to spread it. We have to say like, who is an expert at breaking teams into and figuring out, was this team break a good break? Was it the right number of people? Whatever. And I'm like, that's not a real skill. Actually, it is.
It is a real skill. I talked to you last night about the idea of tiered systems across delivery models. Yeah. When you can matrix that out and start formulating actual team size based on the number of software packages you have in your organization.
Well, you also were on a podcast before where we were talking about everything breaks at
3s and 10s.
3s and 10s, yes.
Yep.
Podcast
That was one of the numbers.
Yeah. It was a number.
It was a number.
It was a number that started with a...
Yeah.
It's divisible by
I think
one.
it was a Tim Ferriss article or interview with the CEO of Rakuten to help people find it if they were interested. But multiples of 3 and 10 at 3 million or 3 people, at 10 million or 10 people, the processes you put in place to run the business for an organization that size break in the multiples of 3s and 10s of revenue or people.
So what do you think about these as takeaways? I just threw these up here for just to have some takeaways here because I really didn't know where to go with this category. List the 3 responsibilities that you spend most of your time on. List the 3 responsibilities that that you're supposed to spend your time on 2 years ago. Come on, let's take a step back. None of these leaders have been in their roles 2 years. And then tell me about the gap.
I think there's one takeaway in one that could be a 1.1 type thing is list the 3 responsibilities you spend the most time of your day on that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
Because you're back to the buggy whip salesman, wagon wheel maker, whatever. Those jobs went away. Ice cube delivery guy they just don't exist anymore. But there's something about your day that you enjoy right now.
Yeah.
Figure out how to turn that into something that you can monetize. Yeah. Because I spend most of my time most of my day on things I don't necessarily enjoy that just have to get done. Yeah. And so I try to figure out how to use the tools and techniques that we have available to us now to not spend as much time on them. So I've automated as much of that as I can and try to focus on things I do enjoy, which is working with people, coaching people, understanding problems, fixing the problem, and moving on to the next problem.
You ready to close this podcast out in the last category here, and then we're done? Let's get to the last.
That's number 5, right?
Yeah. What's this one about? This one's short.
No idea.
Yeah.
I'm glad if you like that category, like and subscribe, because the next category is one that I have to blink twice if I'm being held hostage and being forced to talk about AI. The paper includes a healthy dose of AI because, let's be honest, it has to.
It's 2026.
Yikes. So if that lets you know how I feel about it, 41% of organizations are actively implementing AI tools across their agile workflows, and 49% have clear guardrails for how AI is used. And that gap is the entire story of this section. And probably the next several years of people talking trash on the internet.
Listen, where have we been on this roller coaster before? Remember that? Back in the whirlwind days of Agile? Mm-hmm. People are going, we don't know about that. That doesn't work. We know what works. Can't charts and milestones work. So we've been there. And now it's the same thing, right? Just a different A word. That's where we're at.
We're also in the web browser world, right? So our company, we only use Internet Explorer. Our company, we only use Chrome. Yeah. Our company, we only use Claude. Our company, we only use OpenAI. So we're in this tools world right now that is the first web browser world as well. There's limited tools you can use, and we're going to block it in DNS. You can't go there.
Are you saying AI is just another tool, Ed? How dare you?
Oh, if those who were with us last night, I described as I described as my exoskeleton. It helps save my knees, save my back. It's the thing that I wrap around me to help me do my job every day, and I do it a little better, do it a little easier, but it's not. It's not me. It's just a thing I use that does improve the outcomes of the work we do. Yeah. And from a coding standpoint, it is my pairing partner. So back when pairing was all the rage and we can't afford 2 developers to do 1 developer's job, if you're not using AI as your pairing partner, you're missing out on a lot.
So, the crux of why they put this in the paper is they're saying AI adoption is outstripping governance.
Governance, right.
Well, which is true, but I mean, like, what is the word governance? Like, what is that? I mean, again, you're in most companies, at least the Silicon Valleys of the world, like they're all about move fast, break things, and like any like founder small company is all about move fast, break things. So they're not even going to give any credence to this, even if they're the what was it, Delve or whatever the company was, even if they're the Delves of the world or the Theranos of the world, you know, even if they're them or Uber, who just decided they were like, oh, we're not taxis in London, we're just drivers with an app. Has nothing to do with taxi. We're not taxis at all. So I mean, like on one hand, governance is like an outdated word because
governance is definitely a word that is important and needed inside industry and outside industry, right? How's your personal data being used right now? Because you were told to put everything on Google Drive. You put all your stuff on Google Drive, and hey, what's AI doing with your Google Drive? Wow. Are you looking at personal home storage again? Are you bringing everything back home? Because the cloud's a scary place right now. If you look at what you might have put there over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, or even now, right now, what's topical is the banks are now getting scared crazy, right? Yeah. They're talking to one another now saying, what are we going to do with the AI now?
Wasn't it this weekend? Wasn't it this weekend?
Yeah,
they said that we're slowing down this model.
This very week, exactly. Right, it's the slowing down the model. So one of the things about governance is there's really nothing from a regulatory perspective, at least here in the U.S. Europe is a different story, right? Because they do have regulatory and legal guardrails, for one of the better expression, where that companies have to abide by.
Right.
Here, not so much, not at all.
I'm glad you pointed that out because that let me introduce. That opened the door. It's like we're lawyers over here. That opened the door for me to introduce some new evidence, which I hadn't brought up to this point. I was like, blink twice because I don't want to talk about AI. I did notice a thing when I was reading this paper, which is they don't really go super in depth in AI. They just say move fast and governance has to catch up and you're behind and you don't want to be left behind with the AI tools, but also you need to, like, the enterprise level needs some sort of guardrails. Like governance is a genuine gap at the enterprise level because the risk has just become so huge at the enterprise level. Yeah, maybe if you're like a 50-person company or whatever, maybe the risk is like you can contain it in a day, right? Maybe, right? But when I was reading the paper, and then I was also looking into the background of data. What's the name of this company? Data.AI?
Digital.AI.
Oh, when I was looking into the background of Digital.AI, apparently Digital.AI is like 3 companies put together over a period of time. One of which was the original company that did the State of Agile reports. And apparently they have like a they have like a software development, like maybe not a body shop, but like a software development, like custom development shop. They have a consultancy, they have agile coaching, they have these things put together. And once I realized that they had like AI governance services and whatnot as part of something all this clicked into place. I was like, oh, that's why this is in here. Hey, for the enterprise customers, AI is a big risk. And if you're worried about your AI,
come to us.
We just happen to have this AI services solution for you.
Check out our domain.
Check my
.ai.
Check my stuff. Buy my book.
Yeah, but from an enterprise standpoint, I'm gonna go way out on this example, but with the training, stuff that's entered into the model, stuff that you're querying against the tools, and you're asking questions about, and it's giving responses of, and it's training elsewhere, right? The extreme example is you don't want the Coca-Cola recipe guy to load it up and say, how can I improve this, right? I mean, so there are trades, and that was obviously an extreme example, but you don't want your company's trade secrets, your proprietary information, just suddenly leaking out because your teams are trying, hey, help me with this code, and oh, here's all my API keys. Oh, help me with this, and here's my trade secret. Yeah. Oh, here's my client list. Right? These could be real damaging to organizations, and that's where governance needs to cover that from an enterprise standpoint.
Yeah.
And I would also like it to cover it from a personal standpoint, that my own, my wife, who, may not be as technical, they don't make a mistake that becomes a life-altering event for them or us.
I have takeaways here, but I'm not going to list them all just for the purpose of the time. The only one that I want to point out from the takeaways here, which I'm not going to show on the screen, the only one I want to point out from the takeaways here is the bottom one. Whereas, like, if you're on a team where you can make the most immediate impact, it says if you can't name the reviewer for some code that went in, the person worked on it, then you don't really have a governance process, because there was recently a thing in the Linux. I don't know how much you follow like tech news and stuff, but like the people that maintain Linux, they apparently like Linus Torvald like made a thing where he's like, hey, I understand you're using AI and it's pretty good, but like you still need to review the code and then your name goes on it as the person to blame.
Yeah.
You know, it's the dev tool it's blame is part of the tool. Anyway,
We talked about that a little bit last night.
Okay.
In the talk last night, the conversation was you can't say AI generated it
Right.
as an excuse as to why it's wrong.
right.
You generated it using AI.
Yeah.
So you can't allow yourself or your team to fall into the somebody else did it. It's not my fault. It is your fault.
That does
The accountability lies with you as the human.
Correct.
Absolutely.
that does counter a bit of the hype online that says you can just turn these over to autonomous systems and they'll do everything for you, and they'll wash your car and take your kids to school and everything.
What he just said, but what you just said was topical just not too long ago, in the early to mid days of AI, which again, not that long ago.
2 years
but
ago.
with agentic AI now, people are saying, let it make all the decisions because it's smart, it's learning. Yeah, and that's where I feel like people are absconding their, I guess their accountability, responsibility as the human in the loop, and simply saying, well, the AI did that. And isn't the AI much better than any human because it's superhuman, right?
You know what? In a racy matrix, AI fits in there somewhere, but so do you.
Yeah, you're in the A column as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly.
Are you saying there's a you and team, Ed? Is that what you're saying?
when it's me and my agent, yes.
I'm tired, boss. Sorry.
But yeah, the point I was just trying to make is we do need to maintain one accountability person, someone you can actually talk to so that you can learn what happened so it doesn't happen again, right?
Yep.
So that the team member that did it as a leader provide some grace, provide some coaching, right? Depending on the severity. There's a great Jack Welch conversation of, I just taught, you just learned how to lose $5 million. No, I'm not going to let you take that lesson to someone else. Don't do it again, right? So there are going to be those big mistakes that are going to happen using AI, but you can't blame, it's still you. And own it, own the responsibility, learn from it, and then as a leader, show some grace where you can, and you learn from them as well.
All right, so let's clear this category. So, what is the AI governance situation at your company? Do you have a formal policy, or are you based on vibing, or you don't talk about it? Because listen, no strategy is a strategy.
Bad news travels fast. So if you have an incident from an alienated thing, you just basically bury it. That's what I'm seeing happen out there. It still leaks out sometimes, but yeah.
Listen.
For every one that leaks out, how many don't?
Bring your shovels. Is that, or is like, listen, Jensen Wang's out here trying to sell shovels, so just bring your shovels and
And your leather jackets.
friend of the show and your cool leather jackets. So comment below if you've got a cool leather jacket, and that's the 5 main segments that we wanted to talk about today. So we talked about spotting the lemons market. That the whole we didn't go super deep as the podcast went on. Like the AI one, the jury's out on that governance thing to see if it's dangerous to the point where you just can't use it without guardrails, and we'll see what happens in the next 6 months to a year with AI. But the rest of it, the positions being eliminated and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of market for lemons stuff in this report that came to my mind. I'm interested in what people listening to this think about it. We also talked about using real stats from the report to push back on transformation theater. We kind of talked about it along the way because there's a lot of stats in here that, I don't know, they kind of contradict each other and don't really make a lot of sense. Or maybe they do make sense, but not in the way that the report is trying to say. Like, and then I'm wondering if people are coming online to my more cynical side of the house of there's a lot in here between data and sentiment and just pure sales copy. So I'm interested in what people are taking away from this podcast. So any closing thoughts, Ed or Om?
I think that I'll let you close, but I think taking the time to read the lemons market, study 12-page documents, it's worth the time. It does allow you to kind of think a little bit differently about what disinformation in a retail sales situation, how that would influence you. And then the study in and of itself, if you take every result together and try to come up with one final assumption or a conclusion, it's contradictory. But if you look at the responses and can try to get into the head of the people doing the response, there is some meaningful data in there. There is some useful information. The write-up is worth reading because they did try to take some statistical anomaly and acknowledge that it exists versus just putting it out there without acknowledging it. So I think it's worth the time to read both of them. I think it's worth the effort to understand them and find out what the takeaways mean to you and your organization, your team, and your career. Specifically, where you talk about where the section was about the bifurcation of the roles, understanding that some roles are going towards strategy, some roles are going for obsolescence, and then how do you make a safe landing for you and your family.
Yeah, and let us know what you think about today's podcast and any other topics you'd like us to delve into. Maybe a year from now, when the next report comes out, we'll see if there's any sense in like doing a comparative analysis. But yeah, while you're in there, please like and subscribe, because every like supports a puppy somewhere.
Siri, set a timer for 1 year.